Hey everyone, welcome to the official Secrets of Golarion panel for PaizoCon 2022. I'm James Jacobs, I'm the creative director for Pathfinder, and let's have my illustrious guests introduce themselves as well.
I'm Eleanor Farron. I am one of the senior developers on the Lost Omen line.
I'm Luis Loza. I am the other senior developer on the Lost Omens line.
Great. So this is a panel we do every PaizoCon and even maybe every Gen Con. It's one that I really enjoy, not just because it's super easy to set up, but that's a factor. But because it's a great place to just chat with people and pull back, the curtain on Golarion and reveal some secrets. One thing we're not going to be telling you is how Aroden died. That's kind of the central secret of the setting, and it's one of the things that the whole thing is kind of based on. And as long as that mystery persists, it continues to propel things forward. Pretty much everything else is open season. So I'm going to be moderating this, asking questions of the two of you, and I'll answer some of them here and there as well. Where I've got some that I've pulled from the Discord chat for this panel, and then some others that Luis, you set up a Reddit subreddit to grab some from. But I'll also be grabbing questions out of the stream here if anybody has any specific questions they want to get answers. So, this is a Pathfinder Golarion, so for questions about Starfinder, there's not really much we're going to be able to say there. So Golarion didn't go anywhere; it's still here. Anyway, so
It's in Gorag's pocket. He accidentally ran it through the dishwashing machine.
Yeah. Cool. All right, so let's get started. I'll let kind of some of the questions start building up in the chat, and we'll grab some from Discord and Reddit. So Eleanor, let's start with you. Where did Grandmaster Torch retire to, and why wasn't he in Lost Omens Legends?
Grandmaster Torch is probably in Absalom, and probably under very polite house arrest at Absalom. But he might move if he decides to. You never know with that guy. Why wasn't he in Legends? I think he was on the short list actually, but we didn't have space for all the people we wanted to put in Legends, so. You're gonna have to convince more people to buy Legends and nag Eric Mona to publish Legends 2 if you want to see Grandmaster Torch.
I think we started with the list twice as long than what we got in the final book for what we were thinking, and it was really hard to trim down. So there's a lot of people that almost made the cut that could have been in there. So we thought about Grandmaster Torch.
Cool. Luis, let's see here. What's the deal with the Primal League region over in Arcadia? Any preliminary internal ideas for what's going on? And while you're at it, what's the Land of Second Souls deal going on? People are eager for Arcadia.
So, if you look at Guns and Gears, there is a map, a rough map. Don't expect that to be necessarily a finalized. It's not to scale and all that stuff. Who knows? If we ever give you a final map, that might not look exactly like that. But there's a map of the Deadshot Lands meta region, which we introduced there, as well as name drop a couple of different other ones throughout there. So there's like Fallen Razatlan, there's Land of Second Souls, and one of them is the Primal League, which is to the north of the Deadshot Lands. And that was Ron Lundeen's creation because he wrote that entry. So we have to figure out what exactly that means. If you were to ask me today, and that doesn't necessarily mean that that's what would be if we ever go over to Arcadia. It would be kind of a place where there's kind of an accord between a lot of primal casters and entities and fae. So druids and fae and other creatures of nature probably run that place and maybe keep out civilization through some kind of accord. Whatever this joining or coalition is probably called the Primal League itself, and that's where that name comes from for that meta region. But we'll see what happens. As for the Land of Second Souls, I will say there is a case file in Dark Archive that looks a little bit into the Land of Second Souls. And if you want to learn about that, I'd say check out Dark Archive. I will just say it's a place where death isn't broken necessarily, but it's just got an interesting little twist.
Cool. Let's see here. Looks like the chat's got a couple of questions about the eldest. I'll grab those real quick. One of them: would the eldest be capable of killing a god, similar to how Lamashtu killed Desna's mentor? When is Ing gonna make his move? Is the Lantern King capable of deceiving Shaika? The eldest were created by James Sutter way back in the day, and they're kind of one of the unique to Golarion Pathfinder deity demigod kind of pantheons that has really struck a chord. In the new version of Kingmaker that is finally, it's off to the printer and should be available later this year. There's a fair bit more lore about the eldest and how they work and what's going on. In particular, the Lantern King's got some shenanigans going on in there. When it comes to killing a god, since gods don't use rules, they are beyond they don't have a level, they don't have hit points or anything like that. Whether or not one lives or dies is purely driven by storyline. And so if we wanted, or you wanted to tell a story where one of the eldest took out one of the deities, yeah, you absolutely could. You'd want to make it a big deal, like maybe the focus of an entire campaign or the culmination of a campaign. But yeah, that could absolutely happen. It would be best if it's kind of plays into the themes of that eldest, rather than just they got in a fight and one of them died. So it's certainly possible. It's something that we're pretty hesitant about doing because it's a game not just for us or your group. It's a game for every group, and there's certainly folks out there who have different favorite deities, and if we kill off a deity, we run a pretty strong risk of alienating players who are fans of that deity. So it's one where we have to pick and choose those storylines. It's also one we don't want to do too often because it should be a really rare incident, and the more often we do it, the less rare it gets. So let's see here. Eleanor, here's a question for you. Someone writes, I love the Mwanga Expanse book. Can we expect any expansion on or elaboration on Shishkas, Kronsarus, and Galomas in the form of NPCs? What's the best way to utilize those entries in the book in the meantime?
Well, I hope so. There's actually there's like a little baby Konrasu ball in Dark Archive who's really cute. They showed up in the slides in Eric's keynote. I can't otherwise say what we might do in the future because we haven't done it yet. So no guarantees. I certainly hope that we come back to them. As for what to do with them in the meantime, they are very specifically meant to be mysterious and unknown, and just interacting with them is a discovery. And like I think that a lot of people who get really enthusiastic about the game and they just read all of the books and all the material, and they like to play knowledgeable characters who know everything. And so you find these mysterious people. It's like, oh, I got a 31 on my knowledge check. I know everything about them. Let me tell them about their own culture. And they're very well-meaning, but I think it can be frustrating to the GM, and it can be frustrating to people who want to play that type of character and play up the mystery about them. And so until such a time that we come back to these peoples, I would take that as the opportunity to make things your own, make it your own secrets that people can uncover either as the GM or as a player playing something that's very mysterious without somebody else jumping in and telling the story for you.
Cool. Here's one for you, Luis, from the chat. Will we be getting full rules for Starguns and Guns and Gears? I didn't see anything that specifically gave them stats.
So Starguns are interesting in that they are unique magic items. So you won't have a predetermined array of the abilities they can do or anything like that. Each Stargun should be a unique item. I believe you might be able to take a peek at the treasure vault to see if you want to find another one or two in there. But they won't have any kind of obvious rules for making them. They're all going to be unique items, and that means you can kind of already start making them now if you go use the GMG rules and make your own fun firearms. I'd say use the Rowan rifle in Guns and Gears as a starting example. It does interesting things. It might even have almost a kind of mind of its own, where it only works for people that uphold its cause, or in that case of the Rowan rifle supports the Fae of Arcadia and stuff like that. So go have fun, make your own fun magic item. Stargun, I'd say shoot for 15th level or higher. They should be pretty rare and exciting things that probably you can build an entire adventure or a whole campaign around.
Cool. So here's one that I think I can answer from the chat. What's the history of Windsong Abbey? What's going on with that place? Windsong Abbey is a location that I first came up with ages ago for my homebrew setting. I kind of wanted I guess the original idea was like a sort of a United Nations of religions and faiths in my setting. I wanted a place where you could get a representative from all of the different faiths into one place, and sort of a safe place for them all to share information, to chat, to philosophize without, fear of fighting each other, because, clerics of Sarin, Ray, and Rovagug don't usually get along. And so I brought it into Golarion, into Varisia, back in those early days when we were scrambling in the transition from the D&D magazines to Pathfinder and making things up basically all brand new. And I leaned into my homebrew because it was easier to grab that information. So in the setting, Windsong Abbey is kind of the same thing. It's a place for the core 20 deities mostly. There's a couple that kind of aren't invited, but where representatives of each can get together and share information, share stories, talk about discoveries and philosophical ideas and mythologies, and share legends between themselves. And it ended up being sort of falling apart when the Age of Lost Omens began, and for Rasmure, her clerics and worshippers kind of lost their way a little bit when fate and destiny and prophecy kind of went berserk. So it kind of fell into ruin, and it became a location. I think back in the part 4 of Shattered Star, we set an entire adventure there. So if you want to see like the map of it and how it looks today, check out Beyond the Doomsday Door and part 4 of Shattered Star. When I was chatting with Mark Merland about putting something onto the fiction section of our site that just talked about mythology and ancient legends and all of that, having it be something aligned with the Windsong Abbey made sense to me, because that was a place where in world you have a bunch of different beliefs coming together with their own different ideas on where things come from. And the whole idea of that line of fiction is to present in-world legends that we're not saying this is the way it is. It's not like us speaking as the publishers of the game to you, the GMs running the game, that this is the only way it is. It's meant to be sort of a place where you can like find inspiration, and without it having to be canonical for every setting. So that's kind of the nutshell history of Windsong Abbey. Let's see here. Eleanor, someone is super curious about the PostWorldwound area. What are the long-term effects of what's going on there? What's going on in the future?
Well, unlike a lot of Hollywood movies, the demons didn't get sucked into the world wound when it closed and conveniently whisked away or destroyed or whatever. The ones that were in the area are still in the area, so that's kind of still a problem. And everything's covered in demon blight, and so the Crusaders have to clean that up, except most of the Crusaders that actually care about fighting evil have gone south to go fight Tar-Baphon. So you've got like pardon the colloquialism, skeleton crew up in Mendov, still trying to purify the place, still trying to mop up all the demons. And also, Queen Galfrey went off to become the Herald of Iomide, so she left her chancellor in charge, but 100 years of one ruler has sort of gotten people used to that one ruler, so the political situation is kind of shaky. And also, the people of Sarkoris are starting to come back now that their home isn't completely hopeless. But you have, the Sarkorans left, or at least what survived of them left over 100 years ago. And so you have this diaspora of people who are coming back from all over the world. No one's sure what a quote unquote true Sarkoran looks like anymore. You've got, people from Wangi Expanse, got people from all over Avestan, trying to figure out, it's like, well, my ancestor said that we get to have this part of land, and this is where we used to live. So, well, my ancestor said it was mine, and the poor chancellor has to sort through all of this and deal with some historical wrongs that the Crusaders did to the original Sarkorans, try and sort out, demon trickery from actual Sarkoran relics, and even that, normal Sarkoran relics are probably kind of bitter and mean after 100 years of demonic occupation. I'd call it kind of a mess. It's a mess that could have a hopeful ending now that the Worldwound is closed, but it's still a mess. And I really would like to go back and revisit Mendev and Sarkoris again to see what it looks like in the post-Worldwound era.
Luis, there's been a couple of questions, people asking, like, what about a book about trade and services? People who want to do caravan sailing or politics or intrigue or festivals, or do we have any plans for anything like that?
Wouldn't you know it? If you go downstairs right now to the PaizoCon store, you can can't touch the new Lost Omens travel guide, which covers a little bit of that. Travel guide is focusing on, I think someone referred to it as the guide to NPCs in a way, because it's all the stuff that happens when you're not adventuring, all the culture, all the food and festivals and trade and stuff like that. So there is a section on trade, which we'll discuss, how do they maintain the silver standard and keep all the prices relatively the same? Why does it cost me, 2 silver for some very fine ale up in Avestan and also down in Garoon? Because wouldn't you know it, you'll find out in that book. We get trade routes and a lot of different stuff. So there's a lot of kind of nitty gritty, real world building going on in that book. You get a lot of details on like the base price for wool and lumber and stuff like that. So if you want that kind of information, I'd say check out Travel Guide. And I think there is at least a spin-off. They're kind of building off of what was in Travel Guide. Some details on the specific major trade routes throughout the Inner Sea. That's going to be coming in an AP back matter in the coming months. I think it's in Bloodlords. I don't remember exactly where it is, but it's not too far out. So if you're looking for trade info, you got that coming up here within the next year for sure.
All right, let's see. Oh, here's one from the chat. Is Vire politically a part of Ravenel, or is it independent? Or does it play at being a good neighbor and partner to Cantargo and then does what it wants? Vire is sort of, it's technically a part of Ravenel, but it's also very independent. And kind of the same way it was when it was before Ravenel seceded and became its own thing. Vire is sort of a place on the very edge of the old nation of Cheliax, now Ravenel, where it's sort of a what happens in Vire stays in Vire sort of mentality. It's a place where people can go and do whatever they want and then leave and be pretty confident that whatever they got up to there is going to stay more or less secret. It's also a place where the leaders and the most dangerous menaces that are in Vire are really high level. And that's sort of, I kind of try to set Vire up as a high level urban location you can go to and adventure and, face challenges and so forth. So since it's a combination of really high level, there's a lot of NPCs and creatures there that a lot of people on the Inner Sea region don't really want to mess with. But also because it's sort of a mutually assured destruction thing. Like if one person reveals secrets about it, their secrets are going to be revealed. So it's pretty much a place where Cheliax continues to stay hands off with, and Ravenel is they like having that there, but they're also kind of walking on eggshells around it and letting it continue to do its thing, so that it can just stay basically what's going on. So yeah, it's sort of its own thing. It ties a little bit. There's questions about what is Nagorber's past, and are we going to learn anything more about him? That's something eventually that I think we might investigate. Certainly, I don't know if we came out and said it specifically in text in Hell's Rebels when we first started talking about Vire, but that's where Nagorber was born, where he came to power first, where he's from. And it's one of the oldest cities in the Inner Sea region. It predates Cheliax for sure. And so there's definitely stuff going on there that I would love to get back to at some point, whether it's a novel or a adventure path or what. So let's see. Eleanor. Oh, here's a good one that people are asking about. Who or what is the patron of the Crimson Oath?
It's Erasni. We almost said it outright in the World Guide. I'm actually, I feel like more people thought it was Erasni at the start than might think now. I feel like most people thought it's Erasni, and then as the books went on, there's like maybe some other options. Maybe it's Erasni.
Yeah, I'm of the opinion though that maybe Erasni has possibly inspired other deities to maybe be helping out as well. So I feel like whether or not there's any direct influence, I feel like by this point Regathiel's like, yo, Erasni's pretty cool. Maybe I like the cut of her jib. Maybe I'll also help out these knights and stuff like that.
Here's a fun one for you, Lewis. Are gods capable of getting drunk?
Oh yeah, for sure. If you can kill a god, you can get a god drunk, right? That probably makes it even easier to kill a god, right? If they're drunk,
what would
then you
Caden
just push them down
Kalen's
to the divine
life be like if he couldn't get drunk?
Yeah,
I think that would be like the
you're a
person
god,
you'd change.
Yeah, you can choose to get drunk if you're a god.
Let's see here. I don't think there's anything official, but what is the headcanon on the Cipher Gate? There is actually something official. It's revealed. We hinted about it as early as Rise of the Runelords, but the final adventure in Return of the Runelords, spoiler alert, there's going to be a certain amount of spoilers leaking out depending upon what questions we answer. But the Cipher Gate is basically a time window where you can like manipulate it and look forward or backward in time. And even if you use enough power, you can use it to warp time or move through time. It's sort of a time portal, basically. And we are pretty hesitant overall to do too much time travel stuff, because if you time travel to another setting, that's another timeline. That's a brand new setting. And we put a lot of work into setting up Golarion and the Inner Sea region in the current era. So there's a fair amount of time travel stuff going on in Return of the Runelords, and you want to check that out for, particularly the book 6 has a fair amount of Cipher Gate stuff going on with it. There's also Dark Archive, I believe, has some time themed stuff going on with that you might want to check out. Eleanor. Oh, this is a good one. I know the answer to this one, but I don't know. What is the status of Tincha, especially the various nations? Is there anything planned for Tincha?
Stay tuned.
Yeah, that was an easy one. Let's get you another one real quick since I was back. Who is bringing Stasian technology in, and why are they doing so?
I mean, it's not really someone bringing in active tense. It's someone brought in, as in some Tsarist Russians came over with Queen Anastasia because the rest of the Tsars were dead, so you may as well. And among them were, some of them had World War I era Russian rifles. Some of them had World War I era engineering knowledge. And that technology sort of leaked and collided with stuff from Numeria in Ustalov because the Technic League collapsed and more stuff is leaking out of Numeria. So those two technologies kind of collided in Ustalov, where you have a bunch of people who live in a creepy gothic setting and often make unwise decisions. And that's where you're starting to see more and more of the Stasian coils and technology based on it.
Cool. Luis, here's sort of a kind of a top level question. Any lessons learned from ongoing lore from the change from Pathfinder first edition to second edition?
I think one thing I've realized is that it's so fun to set up new villains. So we need to be actively setting up new villains. And I think there's a lot of villains that were in 1E, maybe just kind of on the fringes, that we now get a chance to bring forward in the spotlight. As fun as Rune Lords are, turns out we've gone through most of those at this point. So, we got to find new villains. And once it's time to promote a lot of them, I think, for example, Walkenna is one that is kind of getting primed to be a pretty notable villain that might be getting some resolution someday in the future. So, but in addition to that, we also have an opportunity to create a lot of new villains. So I think this is a great time to kind of look around places that maybe didn't have a final boss, if you will, and start setting those up so we can both give groups at home ideas for their own campaigns, and maybe set up those dominoes for us to knock them down later in the future.
Nice. Yeah, building off that a little bit, there's a question about Tree Razor. Is he still vibing in the woods or looking to expand his territory? We put Tree Razor into the second edition bestiary as kind of a replacement to Rask as the top tier monster, but also to set him up as a villain that we're going to be doing something with in second edition. I don't know when or where or how. I would love to do a adventure path where it's basically elves versus Tree Razor and resolve that whole thing once and for all. It's sort of like the storyline in Gult, which we also resolve in Night of Great Death. These regions that we set up over a decade ago that we always had a plan for, but there's more plans than opportunities for us to tell stories. So some of these just kind of keep sort of sitting, waiting in the wings. So yeah, there's going to be sort of a Tree Razor theme something at some point, I hope. Another question here that I can answer real quick. Are we ever going to get a technology guide for second edition Pathfinder? I would love it. And in fact, that's something that I've actually been working on in like kind of the off moments between working on Kingmaker, Venture Pass, and other stuff like that, is just kind of noodling in my head what that would do, because Numeria is still a part of the setting, and we're continuing to do society adventures that touch up against it, locations. There's characters in like Lost Omens Legends, and we need to have some sort of framework on how to present those rules. In fact, for those familiar with Kingmaker, one of the first times we introduced high-tech, super science stuff into the setting was through a character in that adventure path. And so in the remake of Kingmaker, I had to figure out how to present those two technological items in a way that still worked. And it's sort of the same problem I had first time around with Kingmaker. So I would love to have some sort of new technology guide. Let us know. That's the type of thing that if you want us to do something like that, let us know online or that you're looking for that sort of things. And that'll definitely help get those squeaky wheels greased, I guess. Eleanor, let's grab one here from the chat. Why not do a full city? Why not have more detail in cities so we have room to shop city to city?
Stay tuned. But also,
yeah,
shop to shop. Come on. What do you want from us? You want the yellow pages? We don't do that. We don't do books that long.
Yeah. We even had Absalom, which is probably the most in-depth we've ever gone or ever will go on a particular city, and that doesn't have every single shop, every single building located, partially because that would be impossible to fill a whole book with, like, unless you just want a line that says, this is the shop that sells shoes, this is the shop, that's boring. You want plot hooks and ideas and NPCs that come with that. But we also want to leave players and GMs space to make those buildings be whatever they need them to be. If you needed an empty warehouse and you point at a building and it turns out, oh, actually that sells cakes, crap. But what do I do with this building? Where do I put this warehouse now? You don't want to run into that. We would we would prefer that we we leave those spaces open for GMs to fill in. That's why also sometimes we set up plot hooks and NPCs and villains and all these ideas that we don't get around to. We know we don't have enough time to get around to every single idea we set up, just for the intent purposes that GMs and players will flesh that out in their own games. And also, if you're a player, you want to know where you live, and if someone already lives in that house or every house in the entire city, what are you going to buy? What house is going to be yours? So we intentionally leave some space to play with for that kind of thing.
It's like those MMORPGs where everyone bought the houses that are on the map, and now nobody can buy a house anymore.
Yeah.
Since you mentioned Absalom there, Luis, who do you think is the most likely to become the new Primark there?
So I think if you want, I think it's up to your group, but at the end of Agents of Edgewatch, you have 3 to 6 20th level PCs that probably one of them is angling to be in a leadership role that might be the next ruler of Absalom. So in your home game, it's probably one of your PCs. But if it were up to me, if I had to decide today, like what our canon answer would be, not saying that this is what it'd be, I think we just leave Winslow Starborn. I think he's probably doing a good enough job that the people like him and decide, you know what, let's make him the official role. Otherwise, there are a few other likely candidates in there. I think Ulthun comes to mind, and leader of the guard, I forget her name. But there's some other likely candidates among the NPCs, but most of them are focused on their other stuff, like their particular goals. Like Ulthun is focused on building up a nice last one, helping out with that. So I think Winslow would probably be like, oh, well, no one else really wants to do it. I've already been doing it. Let's just keep working with that.
You're way more optimistic than me, Luis.
All right. Let's see. There's a couple of Red Mantis questions. Like, does a Chekak kill everyone that survived the trials of the Starstone Cathedral? What's the deal? What's going on with the Red Mantis? There's sort of there's a little bit about them in Lost Omens Legends. One of my favorite bits there is this rumor that somebody hired Blood Mistress Jacqueline to take out the Whispering Tyrant, and they're still doing their thing. I would love to do a adventure path where you play Red Mantis assassins, and an evil adventure path where you go up against a greater evil. We just did the Mark of the Mantis one-shot adventure, so they're still out there doing their thing. So as for whether or not a Chekak kills those who survived the trials of the Starstone, I mean, there's only been a few really that made it through and became deities, and he's cool with them. So no, not really. The Starstone Cathedral is something that a lot of people are asking about. Like, we want a map. What goes on in there? How deep is the pit surrounding it? Whereas how did Aroden die question is not something we're going to ever answer. I'm pretty sure at some point we're going to go do something full on with the Starstone Cathedral. It's kind of like the biggest mega dungeon that we've promised and never done anything with. The tricky thing is that it changes what's inside depending upon the person trying to take the test. All previous storylines, there's one person taking the test, but the game we publish and adventures for are not solo games; they're for parties. So, the idea of what would happen if a party of adventurers went in there is it's never really been explored before. So, it's something we're working on, but it's kind of the big question of what's going on. Sort of like, so we want to be able to, I guess, do it right, do it justice. So we'll get there hopefully eventually at some point. There's another question here in the chat. What city in the Inner Sea region hasn't had much focus on materials that you'd like to shine the spotlight on? And let's get both of you to nominate a city you'd like to see fully explored. Eleanor, you go first.
No, I don't want to go first. I don't have an answer.
Luis, you go first.
Okay. I feel like I'm rare among Paizo staff in that I pretty much enjoy dwarves. I'm into dwarves. Dwarves are cool. So I think checking out one of their sky citadels at some point and giving it a pretty good look would be fun to do someday.
I think for myself, since I'm Scott Barissia stuck in my head and all of that, I'd like to see Riddle Court. We've done a big book on Sandpoint. We've done a big book on Magnamar. We've done a big book on Corvosa. We've done a big book on Karamaga. We haven't done one yet on Riddle Court, so that's one I'd like to see more. We've certainly done focus on Riddle Court before, but that would probably be my nomination. If I had to pick something that we've never touched anything about whatsoever before, I'd pick. I don't know. I'll stall a little bit longer by calling.
Is there a city like in Kyonen maybe that we haven't?
Yeah, I mean, there's not a lot of cities in Kyonen. You know, I mean, it's sort of. It's the elves are pretty good about like living at peace with the environment and all of that.
Eleanor, do you have your answer yet?
But I don't know. Maybe any of the cities in Thuvia, because we don't know anything about the cities in Thuvia, and they've got to be doing something when they're not peddling immortality potions.
Yeah, I'm going to jump on that one too. It's like so much of what Thuvia is about before is like, this is where the Sun Orchid Lister comes from. And obviously there's more going on in Thuvia than that. And any one of those locations there could be explored and is an opportunity for more. There's such a long history of like the Tekratenan League and Jiskin Empire and Assyrian stuff going on in the background of Thuvia that there's got to be a lot of stuff going on in there. Another one for let's go with Eleanor, because I know you had such a fun time in Gods and Magic building that giant table at the end of it. Are there any plans for
James? Why do you hate me?
Are there any plans for deities that didn't make the cut for Gods and Magic, like Pico Perry and Tabris, to be expanded upon?
Okay, so that's turning into secrets of the Paizo publishing schedule and not secrets of Golarion. But I mean, we try to keep exploring deities that haven't gotten their fair time in the sun. If you want a Gods and Magic 2, again, that's something to go bug the heck out of Eric Mona about. But often those sorts of articles, when they're not showing up in books, will show up in the back matter of Adventure Path as sort of a resource if that god features heavily in the adventure. So we hope so. That doesn't necessarily mean it'll happen.
Yeah, we can't guarantee that every god is going to get ported over to 1E in a big giant chart that way, but we are bringing stuff over occasionally here and there. So if you look at the Lost Omens books, there are usually every once in a while, every 2 or 3 books, there's a section on religion that features new deities or bringing back some old ones. So Long Expanse had a big section of religion. Knights of Lastfall had that, so we brought over some of the Imperial Lords over to 2E in that manner. So yeah, just keep an eye out. I can't guarantee that we'll get your favorite one in, but we're definitely looking to keep adding more back into 2E as we go on.
So another one for you, Luis. What's the Knight of Lastfall's stance on non-evil undead membership? We've got one at least. Iliana Testaki. Oh man.
Yeah.
So what about ghosts and skeletons?
Yeah. So Iliana Testik is an interesting character in that she was a knight first and then became a vampire, as you can read in the now released Knights of Lastfall. And she's holding strong. She's keeping to her good convictions and whatnot. And I think, first off, good undead are rarities enough that like they are all, a unique own little story on their own, even if it's not necessarily one that you play out at a table. It's like kind of an interesting enough NPC. Iliana got her own little focus in that book because of that being so notable. But if you read that book, it talks about membership into the Knights of Lastfall and how the Knights of Lastfall kind of get together. When someone comes by and says, I want to join up, I want to be a knight, they discuss it and they say, oh, well, we don't think you have the right stuff for being a knight. And there's kind of a little process, a little mini tribunal kind of thing, where eventually you can earn membership in the Knights of Lastfall if you're persistent and show your willingness to do good and follow the morals and values of the Knights of Lastfall. So if the Knights of Last Wall probably would be very hesitant if a zombie or a skeleton or a ghost showed up and says, "I'd love to be a knight," but they'd probably give that skeleton a fair shake, a fair try at being a knight. And if they live up to it and swear to do good, and that they'll keep them along. And also, if anything does go wrong, the entire Knights of Last Wall can just kind of converge and destroy this one undead pretty easily if it turns out it's a trick.
I have to interject here. We're so sorry, skeletons. You're so misunderstood. You only want to socialize, but I don't think you should.
All right. Are there any plans about aboliths? Are they still scheming to control Golarion? Yeah, I mean that's kind of their thing. They want to be the manipulators behind the scenes. We've got a fair number of veiled masters that we've outed as being like part of societies here and there. One of the fun things about aboliths, of course, is that the abolith itself is from Dungeons and Dragons and is in the SRD, which is why we can use it. But we've done a lot of work on expanding that whole family of monsters and giving them their own sort of history and mythology and stuff in Pathfinder. So I'm eager, particularly, to just look at how the Ulat Kani and the Veiled Masters and all of these other creatures in the Algolthu species, what they're up to. I'd love to do more stuff with that. We did the Ruins of Aslan Adventure Path, which touched on some of it, but there's certainly more possibility. I could do one secret. I think I've mentioned this in previous Secrets of Golarion panels, but the name Algolthu is, to back up a little bit, we often will rename something like a Sturge becomes a blood seeker, or like Ankh becomes an Ancrav, because we need to use those words for minis or comic books or novels or video games, places where we can't use the OGL, but we can use the idea of like a bug that burrows and spits acid, or a flapping giant mosquito, or something like that. So by making up our own versions of those names, we're able to use those in other areas. And abolith is one of those we can't really use in without using the OGL. So we kind of bundled them all under the name Algolthu. And the word itself is from one of the words that I always mistype when I'm writing is although, and I swap the H and the G and it comes out Algolthu. And Wes Snyder back in the day would always, whenever he was editing anything I wrote, he would circle it, put exclamation points, and draw like a tentacled eyeball thing floating in the margin of the page and say, "Don't use this word. He will hear you. He will come after you." And so Algolthu kind of became a I guess a inter-office meme. And then it's like, oh, that's a creepy sounding word, and it keeps them in the same part of the alphabet. So yeah, I don't know if that makes them more or less frightening, but there you go. Let's see here. Eleanor. Interesting. How do deities like Sarin, Ray, and Shiziro, who share some portfolio material, interact both within their followers but also as an overall divine pantheon?
I mean, some of it is that they often don't have overlaps in their followers just for geographic regions. I mean, if you ask why certain gods are limited to geographic regions, I'm going to bounce you back to James. But I think it actually gets mentioned in Shizuru's entry in Gods and Magic that they're usually aware of one another, and how they view one another probably depends on the individual god. For example, Shizuru views Iomide as sort of like a younger cousin or like younger sister, because they're very similar, but Iomide is so much younger and also so much less jaded. I think Iomide hasn't had a whole lot of horrible things or nasty choices. I mean, she certainly has had to make them, but she hasn't been as around as long as someone like Shizuru, who has had to make all sorts of compromises just to keep her own celestial court running. Um, and so Shizuru is just sort of like, okay, that's nice. You young uns with your high Fulton ideals and jumping around to action without thinking and that sort of thing. But like deep in her heart, Shizuru also sort of not envies, but it's sort of like a wistful feeling for, is like, I used to be like that. I used to know what it felt like to just freely pursue what you thought was just, without having to think about all of these compromises that you made just to keep the universe from falling apart. So I think that when it comes to deities that are similar but not necessarily close to one another, it's going to depend on the individual deities for sure, but I feel like they are all aware of people who are close to their domains.
As to jump in, because you threw that back at me a little bit. The reason that we kind of organize them geographically like that is, it's simply we can't detail. We've got hundreds of deities in our setting, and we have to have some sort of mechanic by which we just organize in our own heads, or when we're making paginations for books, which deities we spend time talking about. And that's really the main thing. It's also a case of like, if you're a cleric, it's easier to pick your deity from a list of 20 than 200 as well. So I think that as we continue to do new books, the way we're doing it, like we expanded the deities in Mwanga Expanse, and we're continuing to do that thing, is I think the best way to continue to explore those characters. And even though we switched editions, a lot of the lore and the personalities and all of that stuff about these deities still exists in the setting. So it doesn't mean that just because we're in second edition, you can't go back to like Inner Sea Gods and draw information from that as well. Luis, people are asking about Rasmure. What can you tell us about what's going on with Rasmure?
Rasmure's doing great. Yeah, nothing's wrong with Rasmure. I don't know why you would even ask about anything being wrong with Rasmure. He's in a great state.
The secrets of Golarion.
I just got off the phone with him last night. He said he's doing fine. And he's not at all concerned about Tarbafon knocking on his door, anything like that. He's an all-powerful god. No worries about that. But he might be also deciding to take a break and travel around for a little bit and enjoy some time elsewhere for a little bit, because his country's doing fine. He can step away and it's no problem at all. Rasmure's great. Probably the most divine of any god, right? If there were like numbers on gods, his would be infinite +1. He's the best. He's great.
Yeah, pay no attention to the rumors that there might have been a false Rasmure somewhere.
That's just propaganda.
Who might have panicked and hired Jackie to kill the Whispering Tyrant, because Rasmure would never make a silly decision like that if he were there.
I think that clears it up perfectly. Yeah. Let's see. We're running out of time here. I think we got time for one more big question for all three of us to give our take on. I will. Let's see here. What in any of your what? So I like this question because it ties into the idea of like when we went from first edition to second edition, we didn't want to do a world-shaking event and kind of destroy the world and remake it. We wanted to basically transition from the editions in world so that nobody in world would really notice that the rules changed. And at the same point, it gave us a chance to really update the core baseline of the Inner Sea region to reflect on our interests and the world at the time. Because when we first built Golarion, it was 10, 12 years ago, and it's a very different world 10 or 12 years ago. So the question is, what, in your opinions, is a country that has learned its lessons from its past mistakes and are doing things a bit different from Pathfinder 1 to Pathfinder 2? And I will nominate Thassalon as that. That's a region that, back in the day was full-on evil empire, evil wizards running everything, and they went into hibernation, and it's like, we'll come back when, nobody is prepared for us, and we'll pick up where we left off. And one after the other, the Rune Lords come back, and they just got wrecked by adventurers. They're like, nope, your time's over. And the last of them, Sorshan, is looking at this and realizing that doing the same thing we used to be doing is just going to get us killed. So I need to do something different with Thassalon going forward. So having her kind of try to make Thassalon be something that is New Thassalon is a place based in a wilderness region and allows her to come back and do something new with it is my nomination. What about you, Eleanor?
Does Vitrian count?
Oh yeah,
I don't know
absolutely.
if
That's a great one.
colonialism counts as a mistake on the part of the people who are still in Vitrian, but they learned a lesson, which is that I probably shouldn't say what the lesson is in case the FBI puts me on the list. But let's just say that colonialists take some very forceful persuading to go away, and leave it at that.
That's a good one. Luis, what's yours?
Yeah, I think I would say Last Wall is unfortunately had to learn a lesson about their passivity, right? Keeping an eye on Tarvafon was a great call, but maybe trying to find a way to fully destroy him would have been the ultimate. Should have been maybe the ultimate solution. And now he broke free, and a lot of people suffered as a result. But the Knights of Last Wall realized that, like, okay, this whole just standing guard, keeping the vigil wasn't working, or at least obviously didn't work. So let's take the fight to him, and learning about that and incorporating the lessons of the past. It's been, that's their goal. And now they have kind of a more active role in the world as a result. So we'll see if that pays off. But I think they're definitely at least deciding, okay, the old ways didn't play out the way we would hope. So let's try something new.
Cool. Well, thank you both for helping me answer all these questions. I mean, you two have more than taken up the mantle of the lore keepers of Golarion. I love what you guys are doing with the setting, and it's exciting to me because it's like I get to see new stuff that isn't something that's been festering in my head, and it's great stuff. I love just how you've expanded things, and so thank you from me to you for it making Golarion even better than ever. I think that we are out of time. We obviously didn't get to nearly all of the questions, so if folks still have questions, drop them in on Discord. We've got Ask Me Anythings going on there. There's a thread for Secrets of Golarion that we can try to jump in and answer for the next day or two as we get the chance. In the meantime, thank you, and have fun with the rest of PaizoCon.